I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
It's Suicide Prevention Month, a tough time for those who've lost loved ones, but there is hope, and we have important information that can help save lives. Logic's powerful song with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number as its title has been viewed more than 350 million times on YouTube. Its message of hope and staying alive more critical than ever before. College student Elisa McCain was 20 years old when she took her life.
She actually broke a glass door with a fire extinguisher, stepped through, and then she took a running jump, and she jumped off.
McCain, a retired Port Authority police sergeant, had just spent an entire Father's Day weekend with her.
No warning at all. No warning. Just, we think something triggered her to do it. We think she might have broke up with her boyfriend that night, but no warning.
The CDC says that for the total U.S. population, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. But some groups are more at risk than others, says Dr. Elisa English.
We're seeing much more higher rates in young people between the ages of 10 and 25 is the second leading cause of death. And actually in older men, particularly older white males over 65.
Dr. English says the generation raised on social media can feel more isolated from human contact, leading to depression. While sometimes there are no warning signs, the best prevention is real communication.
We need to care, we need to listen, actively listen, not in the language that we think they should be speaking, but in the language that they're willing to share.
The notion that talking about suicide promotes it is completely false, says clinical psychologist Dr. Norman Fried. He encourages parents to be fearless and direct in asking their children if they've ever thought of hurting themselves.
These questions, as scary as they are a way of saying to our children, go ahead and talk to me, tell me, I can take it, and I'm going to help you. Stay safe.
They might say, well, you should mind your business, but no. Ask questions and tell them whatever it is, come to me. Just let me know whatever it is, because I need to know. I need to know that you're okay.
The issues around this are complex. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Everett McCain. He's a retired Port Authority Police Department sergeant. His 20-year-old daughter, Annalise, took her life. And Everett, thank you so much for being with us and speaking on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Also with us is, and of course, our condolences over your daughter, because I'm sure that's something for a parent you never get over.
Nope, you don't.
No. Dr. Elisa English is with us. She's a clinical therapist. Dr. Elisa, great to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Dr. Norman Fried. He's a clinical psychologist, a trauma specialist, and professor at JTS Columbia. Dr. Norman, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Here.
Dr. Elisa, when you look at the way our society as a whole talks about suicide, treats suicide, the way we cover it in the media, what strikes you about what you see?
The fact that we don't necessarily put it in context. The fact of the matter is close to 1 million people worldwide commit suicide. 50,000 people a year in the United States commit suicide. It is the second leading cause of death for young people between the ages of 10 and 25. And so this is a serious public health crisis. And because we aren't putting it in the context of a public health crisis, we're missing opportunities to address it.
And Dr. Norman, when you look at how we treat it and dealing with this every day in your practice, what do you think? Are we doing anything right, or is everything wrong about how we're looking at it?
I believe over the years that I've been working as a psychologist that we are getting closer to treating this situation a lot more like Dr. Elise would want us to. We are recognizing and honoring that suicide is an awful experience and is unfortunately becoming more and more rampant as the years go on. We see it in social media. We see it in our famous TV stars and movie stars, and we are taking it much more seriously than we used to.
Everett, tell us about Annalise and what happened with your daughter.
Well, she was 20 years old, 4 months before she would have turned 21. She was away at school, living in North Carolina. And just one night, early Sunday morning, she took her own life. She jumped to her death. And we didn't see that coming. We had no clue that she would do something like that.
And did she have, she was close to you and she was also close to her mother,
yes,
right?
Yes, I mean, I always told her, if you feel bad, if something's bothering you, don't hesitate to call me or your mom. You know, reach out to us all the time. You know, if you're upset about something, just reach out, because we're there for you. And I guess when she decided to do that early Sunday morning, she just saw no other way, and she didn't reach out.
And then did you have, I mean, as a former first responder, and you were in the unit that dealt with the most severe cases and the most serious emergencies with the Port Authority Police Department, that must have made you feel horrendous that you couldn't be there to help her.
Oh,
even more so.
Oh, even to this day, like, wish I could have been there to stop her. I wish she would have called me, called her mom. I mean, I got the phone call in the middle of the night, like early Sunday morning, like around 3:30 in the morning, that she was in the hospital. So, I mean, I wish she had called me or called her mom. Her mom lived in the same state, so we could have maybe stopped her, and we couldn't.
And you had there were no signs of,
No.
of trouble or problems? Was she being treated for anything or nothing?
Well, we found out afterwards, when her mom went to clean out her apartment, found out that she was taking a medication for depression, but we didn't know about that.
And of course, since she's 20, she could do it on her own.
Right.
Dr. Norman, when you hear this story, there are other people, especially parents, who've had children take their lives. And we appreciate your courage, you know, so much with speaking with us. And I want to give out the phone number, 1-800-273-TALK. That is the National Institute of Mental Health. That is emergency 24-hour, fully staffed, 24-hour talk line if you're having suicidal thoughts, if you have any kind of issues, if you just need to talk to somebody. That they have trained professionals at that phone number. It's free of charge and can be anonymous, 1-800-273-TALK. Dr. Norman, what Everett said, that we didn't see it coming, that's something that I have heard from other parents who have lost their children.
Right.
Do you hear that?
Absolutely. I hear it every day, unfortunately, in my practice. And first I want to say, Everett, thank you for your honesty and your candor. And I do agree that for parents, we don't always see what might actually be going on inside of the psyche of our child. But there actually are some signs that psychologists or other experts might be on the lookout for that would still catch us by surprise, but we look in ways that parents don't. We don't want to see our children sad, so we don't necessarily see the things that they may be saying non-verbally, or in symbolic language, or through facial expressions, or through becoming remote and pulling away. I call it, I came up with an acronym, STAY, and those 4 words would be: is there an increase in use of substances? Is there substance abuse? Because that creates reckless behavior. T, is there a trauma that recently occurred? Is there something that happened that might have created a sense of despondency that is different than a typical day? A, affect. How is affect changing? Is the affect becoming more remote and blunted? Are they becoming less connected? And why? And for lack of another word, yonder. Have they gone yonder? Are they less attached to us? Are they not returning calls? Are they more involved in
They
their
just
own
see
inner world?
just disconnected.
Right.
Dr. Elisa, when you brought up the fact that it's the number 2 cause in this age group, you know, 10 to 24, 10 to 34, in terms of that age group in particular, we're talking about these young children. What causes a child at that age to do something like this?
Well, one of the things we do know about suicide is that 90% of those who commit suicide are depressed and have been suffering with depression or managing depression for a long time. And so, as my colleague pointed out, like, the signs are there. It's just that as people or caregivers or friends and family, we're not necessarily in tune to what those signs are, and we dismiss them. And one of the things that often comes out when people are ready to commit suicide or thinking about suicide, they often say it. And so it's important to be an active listener and speak with your family and friends when it comes to
And to pay
things,
attention
and
if somebody
pay
says,
attention to
I
it.
just can't take it anymore. I'm
Right.
thinking about
And they
doing
do it for years. I mean, they can go on with this for like 10, 15, 20 years before they actually get to a completion. It's not easy to kill yourself. It really isn't. It takes a lot of strength.
May I add to that?
Real quick, and then we'll take a short break. We'll go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say that there are times when people don't mean it, but they say it, and we must take it seriously, even if they're just using it as a type of speech.
Right.
We need to take every word
You
seriously.
need to pay attention. We're going to talk about how to take it seriously.
Absolutely.
When we come back, this is Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers.
The underlying issue is depression, and we need to really think about how we can reduce the stigma around mental illness and depression.
When you talk about taking it seriously, how do you know when somebody's just joking, you know, or making a comment because they're frustrated or they had something very depressing and unpleasant happen to them, or when it's something you need to pay attention to?
That's a wonderful question. And what I would say is a lot of us use it colloquially. We say, I wish I were dead. I want to be out of this life. But they don't mean that they want to be gone from this life. They want to be out of the moment of pain that they're in. And nevertheless, even if it's used in this kind of colloquial way, we need to take it seriously, because quite possibly they're saying something and we may not be hearing it.
Dr. Elisa, you've worked throughout your career with many at-risk groups, different types of at-risk groups. In terms of taking it seriously, what do people need to know the most about that?
I think when someone is really in a dark place and you see that they're not really moving beyond that, they're not receiving any kind of treatment for it, they're ruminating on this idea, the suicide ideation is there, they're talking about it all the time, they seem to be disconnected, like my colleague pointed out, they're no longer engaging in activities that they once found pleasurable. At that point, and I think we must be active listeners, because we're so busy and caught up in our day-to-day life that we're not necessarily paying attention to those signs. Right. And if we, as the individuals that are there, the caregivers, because we are part of the cure, which we'll get to, right, in terms of relationships and how we can both be the poison, the disease, and the cure. We are the cure, and so if we begin to actively listen and pay attention to those who are around us that we care about, we can really find a way to eradicate this problem.
Absolutely.
Everett, with your daughter, did you find out anything afterwards that helped you understand what had happened there?
We think, after talking with her mom, that the circumstances that led up to her ending her life, she may have broken up with her boyfriend, who she only knew for a short period of time. And we also found out that I think she had told one of her friends, maybe, I don't know how long before that happened, that if they broke up, she might end it all. We found that out later, too.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I don't know.
You don't know for a fact, and that what is like the broken heart? Is that what triggers it? Like what you say, Dr. Elisa said, you know, people can be in this space for years and years before they actually act on it.
Right.
Are there triggers, Dr. Norman?
There are triggers, and they're specific to each particular person, because remember, every one of us experiences responses to trauma in this life, and the most powerful side effects of the trauma are a sense of disconnection from others and a sense of disempowerment. And so when we have some kind of traumatic event happen, even if it's just a bad day at work, or a fight with someone we care about, we might accidentally become triggered and have a more primitive response and think about when things really were bad, and we go back to that time and suddenly we don't think so clearly. Stress and tension can actually make us think unreasonably, and suddenly suicidal ideation seems reasonable when it never is.
When it never is. Dr. Elisa, with this young age group, with it, you know, from 10-year-olds up into people in their 20s and even early 30s being this most at-risk group, is social media playing any kind of a role in this in terms of making them feel under pressure?
Well, social media, we always we blame everything on social media. One thing that I think social media is certainly responsible for is that our children are becoming much more isolated, and as a result, they aren't connecting to the very individuals that are there to help them. And because we think that they're home and they're safe and you know, we have some control, we've totally lost control, because they're now totally being controlled by the
device.
By the device.
And
right.
they're on the phone, or they're on the tablet or whatever, and they could be sitting next to the parent.
That's right.
They're being bullied in many ways. There's bullying going on. Social media has a lot of that. It also, in some ways, there's self-esteem issues, because you're looking at everyone in their best life, right? And so you start to question your life and the value of your life. And so, yeah, it plays a role, but the underlying issue is depression. And we need to really think about how we can reduce the stigma around mental illness and depression.
Everett, tell us about one of the things that happens when somebody loses their life, and you went through this with Annalise, with your daughter, is all of the people that are in their life, the friends, the classmates, the other family members, they're traumatized by this too. Tell us what you learned from going through that process.
And everybody was obviously naturally sad, and everybody's questioning and wondering why did she do this. I mean, she seemed like she had so much going for her, but you know, you see what somebody has going for them on the outside, but you don't know what they're dealing with on the inside. I mean, she was going into a senior year in college. She was going to graduate, about to graduate, which her school actually did graduate her posthumously.
Oh, that's great.
But I mean, she had a lot of friends, even though she used to tell me, well, they're not my friends. Well, if you had seen all these people at your funeral and at your wake crying their eyes out, yeah, you did have friends. But she would say, well, they're not my friends, Dad. I'm like, yeah, well, they obviously were her friends. But she didn't realize that, I guess. Maybe her self-esteem was not where it should have been.
So when you, Dr. Norman, when you hear that,
Yeah,
and then
well-
so all the people, and especially with this situation with these kids, because I've heard just anecdotally,
Yeah.
you know, different people with their kids in very good schools too. It's just their 11-year-old, 12-year-old takes their
right.
own life, and then the class is traumatized, the families are traumatized, other kids are traumatized because they don't quite understand what it's all about.
I think it's very important, and I appreciate what you said, Everett, about your daughter, Annalise, because it's very important that we recognize that it doesn't matter what others see about your life. It matters what you see
What
about
she felt.
yourself.
So you're saying even
Anna,
though there were hundreds of kids,
crying and loving her,
She might
Annalise
not
may
have-
felt that way. And so we must understand
Oh,
what
that's a
the
good
experience
point.
of depression is like to the child or teen themselves, because their personal journey is going to direct and dictate whether or not they're going to be more interested in doing this. I also want to add, Everett, that there's the family dynamic that's left is one sometimes of guilt. Could I have known more? Should I have heard the signs more? And there's also anger, and it's really okay to have that anger. We are at times angry with our loved ones for having taken their own lives and putting us in a situation which forevermore we will be traumatized.
I think people get
and
angry
bereft.
when a loved one dies, just for
And
whatever reason.
And it's okay to feel that anger, because this is not the way we expect life to be. And we have to continue the task of living long after those have left us. And whether it's anger or guilt or bartering or just plain sadness, these are welcome emotions.
And
Dr. Lisa, what about that?
Yeah, and I also think there's another thing we need to move away from, and this whole idea of that the person who committed suicide was selfish. Like, we hear that all the time. Like, they were
Yes.
selfish. Selfish because of what? Because they left behind all these people who cared and loved
Right,
them.
right.
But that's not the point. What they were actually selfish from themselves,
That's
that
right.
they didn't love themselves enough, or they couldn't find internally the beauty within themselves so that they can come out of that dark space.
I so appreciate what you say, and when I use the word selfish, I speak in the name of those who felt that way as survivors of someone who succeeded.
But a lot of people say that.
Right.
But you hear
because
you hear
we
that
feel it. We feel it.
people
but
go,
the
"Oh,
truth
that was
is-
so selfish of
Right.
him."
Right.
Like and we've heard cases. You know, I mean, it's almost I'm sure like a textbook classic case of the man who's the sole provider for a
That's right.
family,
Right. And everyone's
and then loses his
destitute.
job,
Right.
and then 6 months later,
Right.
the house they have to move out of the house, everything, and he takes his life. So people go, "He's so selfish."
At times we may feel that way, but in terms of the land of and the journey through grief, we have the whole table of emotions. We at times feel angry, and it's okay to be angry. At times we feel guilty. At times we just are despondent and lonely and just miss the love that was right in front of us. And we think, how could they no longer be here?
But I want to thank all of you for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers. Everett McCain, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Dr. Elisa English, thank you. Appreciate it. And Dr. Norman Freed, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being with us. And again, that number, if you are having thoughts of suicide, if you're feeling depressed, if you just need somebody to talk to or someone close to you does, 1-800-273-TALK. I'm Lisa Evers, your host for Street Soldiers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.